Hello everybody, it's Chris Clark with discgolf.law, and it's that time of year again. We have gotten the proposed rule changes for 2024 from the PDGA. I'd like to go over a few of them with you now. I'm focusing on a few of the rule changes that I found particularly interesting, but you can see the full range of proposed changes on the PDGA website. The first one I want to talk about is scoring. The proposed rule says that all players on the card must keep score at every sanctioned event. They said this is going to maximize scoring integrity and allow for even distribution of the scoring responsibilities among the card. It does limit penalties for incorrect scores to whoever submits the incorrect scorecard, not to the entire card itself. If you refuse to keep score, you do have the potential that you'll be disqualified from the event. You are permitted to delegate your scorekeeping responsibility to your designated caddy. If 30 minutes after you have finished your round, you have not submitted your score as required, you will get a 2-stroke penalty. We've already heard from people saying, well, what if my phone dies halfway through the round? What then? Paper scorecards are permitted. In fact, the tournament director at each event must provide a way for participants to record their scores. If your phone is dead or you don't have a phone, you can get a paper scorecard from the tournament director so that you can meet your obligation to keep score. I'm one of these weirdos that likes keeping score on my scorecard, so I don't mind this. I think it's a decent rule, and I do think there's legitimate reasoning in the effort to make scorekeeping more fair. Whether this really accomplishes the PDGA's stated goal of evenly distributing the burden of scorekeeping among the players, I suppose yes, technically it does so. Previously there would be 2 people who were carrying that burden and 2 who are not, and now out of fairness they're sort of making everyone do it. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a good rule change. Let me know what you think. Moving on. Another proposed rule change is that you have to be a PDGA member now to participate not only in A tier or B tier tournaments, but also in C tier tournaments. Many of the requirements and flexibility that we associate with C tier tournaments can now be found in a new designation, the D tier tournament. D tiers are primarily for 1-day, 1-round events, and also have expressly made flex start tournaments legal and legitimate. There was some questioning under the prior rules, or I guess what are still technically the current rules, about whether flex start tournaments were technically allowed. With the adoption of this new D tier, the PDGA is explicitly stating flex start events are allowed. This next one I think is kind of fun and interesting, and it has to do with how ties are broken. The proposed rule says ties can only be broken by sudden death play. They may not be broken by things like whoever had the hot round or who did better in head-to-head scoring for the final round or something like that. Those are not allowed. It's only a sudden death playoff that is allowed to determine the winner of a particular division. But, as I said, it's kind of a fun rule. The next elements of it that I'm going to describe I think could be really interesting. The PDGA is proposing allowing an aggregate playoff. A tournament director could designate a certain group of holes. Any players that are tied for the lead in their division at the end of regulation play could go and then play this group of holes. Whoever came out as the winner from that group of holes would be the one who won the division. There's obviously the possibility that they could play this group of holes and one or more players could still be tied. If that does happen, then play would continue in a more traditional sudden death structure, playing out just as we have seen sudden death playoffs in the past. Whether you're doing a traditional sudden death playoff or this new aggregate playoff, essentially the bottom line is that play continues until there is a single winner. If you are a competitor and you end up tied for the lead in your division, you do have the ability to refuse to participate in a playoff. Let's say, for example, that you and 3 other competitors all tied for first. If you just elect, I am not going to participate in this playoff, then you're awarded 4th place, and the remaining competitors go on and compete just as they would to see who will get first, second, and third. Another topic the PDGA has addressed in their proposed rule changes is pace of play. There's already a rule or rules that players must play without undue or excessive delay. This new rule expands that to the entire card. Instead of just an individual person being called out for delay, now it can be everyone on the entire group. The group must now ensure that the entire card proceeds without undue or excessive delay. If that does not happen, all players on the card could get an excessive time violation. The final point I want to discuss is the proposed changes to player apparel. All players now must wear a garment that covers their upper chest and lower torso. One explicit proposed rule change is that tank tops are not allowed for any competitor. With the exception of a couple of the junior divisions, t-shirts are also not allowed as any player's outermost upper garment. A player could wear a t-shirt under a polo shirt or a collared shirt, but it cannot be the outermost garment that they're wearing. Shirts that hang below the bottom hemline of a player's shorts are now not permitted to be worn untucked, but they are permitted if they are tucked in. No ripped shirts, shorts, or pants are allowed, even if it is a garment that was intentionally ripped or perhaps even came brand new with a rip in it. That is not permitted as part of acceptable apparel in a PDGA sanctioned event. Players may not wear any apparel with offensive or obscene slogans or logos. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And the wording of this last point that I want to discuss I thought was interesting. It says that players are requested to be available for the media at all times while on site at an event, except for the 30 minutes leading up to their tee time. For example, if a player arrives at the course an hour before their tee time and they wanted to get some drives in or practice putting or go over and work with Seth Muncy and get stretched out and things like that, if it's more than 30 minutes before your tee time, what the PDGA is suggesting is that you should be available for media interviews during that time. I said the wording was interesting. It says the players are requested to be available. It doesn't sound like something where a player could necessarily be penalized if they refused.
Honestly, don't love the press conferences.
But the PDGA is setting up the expectation that players, if you're on site at an event and it's not 30 minutes before your tee time, the expectation from the PDGA is that you are available to speak with the media. The PDGA announced these proposed rule changes and they have asked for comments. The way that you can comment on these proposed rule changes is by sending an email to rules-feedback@pdga.com. They're asking that your comments be in by August 15th, 2023, which isn't a lot of time. It may be the case that you're watching this with maybe only a day or so left in order to comment. So if you're interested, I really do urge you to participate and let the PDGA know what you think of these proposed rule changes. As I said at the start of the video, these are not all the proposed rule changes. You can easily look them up on the PDGA website. I really am curious to hear what your thoughts are about these rules that I discussed and some of these other proposed rules. Maybe I skipped over one that's important to you, or maybe you've got a comment or a thought that might make it better. I would love to hear all that down in the comments. The final thing I'd like to say on this subject is please keep in mind these are proposed rule changes. None of these have taken effect yet. You know, whether you happen to be playing in a local tournament, a local sanctioned tournament, or you happen to be attending a Pro Tour event or a PDGA major, keep in mind none of this has taken effect yet, and some of the things may never take effect. Just keep your eye out for when the PDGA announces which rules have officially been adopted. And until then, you must rely on the 2023 rules as they stand today. As always, sincere thanks for watching our videos. Like, comment, and subscribe.